When the United States military announced they were going to airdrop dead mice onto the Pacific island of Guam, the world laughed. It sounded like a bizarre joke. Why would one of the most powerful militaries on Earth waste aircraft, pilots, and money just to throw dead rodents out of the sky? News outlets mocked it, environmentalists questioned it, and locals stared in disbelief as helicopters filled the air, dropping thousands of tiny, lifeless mice tied to cardboard parachutes. But what looked ridiculous at first turned out to be one of the most effective and unconventional ecological operations in modern history. Because those tiny mice weren't ordinary. They were laced with acetaminophen, the active ingredient in Tylenol. And their real target? Not humans, but snakes. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, because this story proves that sometimes the craziest ideas can actually save nature. Guam, a small island in the western Pacific Ocean, was once a paradise of tropical forests, colorful birds, and untouched beauty. Its skies were alive with the calls of kingfishers, the chatter of honey-eaters, and the flutter of native bats. But after World War II, something sinister began to creep into this paradise. Hidden in cargo ships and military crates, a stowaway had arrived, a creature that would change the island forever. It was the brown tree snake, native to Australia and Papua New Guinea. At first, no one noticed. The snake was quiet, nocturnal, and good at hiding. But as the years passed, it began spreading, slithering across forests, creeping into villages, and silently hunting in the night. And before long, Guam's ecosystem began to collapse. The brown tree snake was an efficient and relentless predator, a master of stealth. It could slither up the smoothest of tree trunks, wrap itself around branches with impossible precision, and slip into bird nests undetected. Its long, flexible body allowed it to reach places no other predator could. Though not venomous enough to seriously harm humans, it was perfectly lethal to Guam's fragile wildlife. To the island's birds, it was a silent, unstoppable nightmare. Within just a few decades, this uninvited intruder had rewritten Guam's entire ecosystem. It devoured eggs, chicks, and even adult birds with alarming efficiency, leaving behind empty nests and lifeless forests. The once musical mornings of Guam, when the air echoed with chirps, whistles, and calls, faded into an eerie silence. Forests that had once danced with wings and melodies became motionless, like a painting drained of sound. The Guam rail, the Micronesian kingfisher, the rufous fantail, all disappeared one by one. Some species clung to survival only through captive breeding programs, while others vanished forever, erased from the wild. The destruction went far beyond silence. Without birds to control insect populations, pests exploded in number, damaging crops and spreading disease. Without birds to scatter seeds, trees stopped regenerating naturally, leaving barren gaps where lush vegetation once thrived. The island's ecological web, a balance built over millennia, unraveled strand by strand. And at the center of this collapse was a single stowaway snake, brought unintentionally by humans, yet powerful enough to undo centuries of nature's harmony. By the 1990s, Guam had a full-blown invasion. Estimates suggested there were up to 2 million brown tree snakes on the island, more snakes than people. They climbed into electrical wires, causing frequent power outages. They entered homes and air bases. Babies were bitten, pets were strangled, and birds were gone. The US military, which had a strong presence on Guam, realized this wasn't just an ecological problem anymore. It was a threat to national operations and human life. So, scientists and military strategists joined forces to find a solution. But how do you kill millions of snakes spread across dense jungle without harming everything else? They tried traps, they tried barriers, they tried poison baits. But the snakes were smart, and their population barely changed. That's when one biologist had a crazy idea. In 2013, The U.S. Department of Agriculture announced one of the most unusual plans ever made for wildlife control. Drop dead mice laced with Tylenol into the jungle from helicopters. At first, even other scientists laughed. It sounded like a bad science fiction experiment. But there was a reason behind it, a clever, calculated reason. Acetaminophen, the drug used in Tylenol, is harmless to humans in small doses. But to brown tree snakes, even a tiny amount is lethal. Just 80 milligrams, less than what's in a children's tablet, could kill a snake in hours. So the plan was simple: attach dead mice, each injected with a precise dose of acetaminophen, to tiny cardboard parachutes and drop them across the forest canopy. The snakes, attracted by the scent, would eat them and die. It sounded ridiculous. It looked ridiculous. But it just might work. When the first helicopters thundered over the jungles of Andersen Air Force Base, the sight unfolding beneath them was unlike anything Guam had ever seen. From the skies, thousands upon thousands of tiny paper parachutes drifted downward, twirling and gliding through the humid air, each carrying a single lifeless mouse. The operation was equal parts strange and mesmerizing, a surreal fusion of science and spectacle. Reporters quickly dubbed it Operation Mouse Drop, and soon the images spread across news outlets worldwide. Locals gathered along the forest edges, some laughing in disbelief, others filming the scene on their phones, watching as the emerald jungle below was speckled with faint gray dots. The entire island seemed to pause, caught between wonder and doubt, as those delicate parachutes disappeared into the canopy. Most people thought it was absurd. Critics called it a waste of resources, while others dismissed it as a desperate stunt by scientists running out of ideas. But nature, it seemed, had other plans. Within just a few weeks, field researchers began reporting something extraordinary. The number of brown tree snakes in the treated zones was dropping sharply. Night surveys that once recorded dozens of snakes now found only a few. Birds that had long vanished from certain areas were suddenly being spotted again. The unthinkable was happening. The mice, once symbols of weakness and ridicule, were turning the tide of a decades-long ecological war. The operation that had started as a joke was quietly rewriting the rules of conservation. The brilliance of the operation lay in its elegant simplicity, a concept so straightforward that it almost seemed absurd. Yet, that was precisely why it worked. The tiny cardboard parachutes were engineered to allow the mice to drift slowly down and land softly on the treetops, the very same high canopies where the brown tree snakes hunted their prey. It was a design inspired not by force, but by observation, by understanding how the snakes lived and using that knowledge to fight them on their own turf. Each mouse carried a carefully measured dose of acetaminophen, strong enough to kill a snake within hours, but harmless to birds, insects, or scavengers that might later come across the remains. Every single drop was a calculated act of precision, a symphony of science, patience, and practicality working in perfect harmony. Each of those mice became a silent soldier in a long, invisible war. A war waged not with guns or traps, but with data, chemistry, and creativity. And unlike ground traps or human-led hunts, these airborne baits could go where no person could. They slipped through dense jungle canopies, fell into ravines, and reached treetop hideouts that had remained untouched for decades. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the strategy began to pay off. Field researchers started finding fewer snakes during nighttime surveys. Bird nesting sites that had been empty for years began to show signs of life again. The once overrun island was changing, not through violence or destruction, but through persistence and clever design. Year after year, the brown tree snake's grip on Guam loosened, and for the first time in half a century, the island began to reclaim its balance. Researchers observed every movement, every reaction, studying how the brown tree snakes responded to this unusual new threat from above. What they discovered was fascinating. The snakes, known for their extraordinary hunting instincts, were incredibly sensitive to even the faintest chemical cues, the scent of prey, the heat radiating from a body, or the subtle vibration of a branch. By combining all these triggers in the airdropped baits, Scientists had managed to exploit the snake's own strengths against it. It was a psychological victory as much as a biological one. Nature's top ambush predator had been outsmarted through science and ingenuity. Acetaminophen, the drug hidden inside the tiny mice, did its work quietly but effectively. Once ingested, it caused rapid organ failure in the snakes, yet posed no danger to other species or to the environment itself. Unlike harsh poisons or traps, it left no toxic residue, no collateral damage. It was surgical, precise, efficient, and surprisingly humane for an ecological weapon. As data poured in, results confirmed what many had doubted. The method was working. What had begun as a controversial, even laughable idea soon evolved into a model of innovation in wildlife management. Scientists around the world began to study it, not just as a strategy for Guam, but as a lesson in creativity, proof that even the strangest solutions can become milestones in conservation when driven by understanding rather than dominance. As the snake numbers decreased, something remarkable began to unfold. A quiet rebirth that could be felt more than it could be seen. In some protected areas, where for years there had been only silence and decay, faint sounds started to echo once again. Birds, the same species once wiped out by the brown tree snake, began returning. The Guam rail, which had been declared extinct in the wild, became the face of a new hope. Breeding and reintroduction programs slowly brought them back into their native habitat. Every flutter of wings, every hesitant chirp, was like nature whispering that healing had begun. And it wasn't just the birds. Insects and pollinators, once thrown off balance by the loss of avian predators and partners, began finding their rhythm again. Flowers that had stopped blooming now flourished as pollination returned. The trees, once still and lifeless, began swaying with movement. Butterflies, beetles, and small mammals reappearing in places that had been deserted for decades. For the first time in nearly half a century, parts of Guam's forest canopy began to sound alive. The soft rustle of wings, the distant call of a bird, even the hum of insects became a melody that the island hadn't heard in generations. It wasn't loud or dramatic, but it was real. It was life returning. The US military continued their periodic mouse drops, ensuring that balance was maintained. Each operation was carefully planned, monitored, and refined. Scientists adjusted the acetaminophen dosage with precision, tracked snake populations through sensors and field cameras, and studied how each change rippled through the ecosystem. What started as a bizarre and almost laughable idea, dropping poison mice from helicopters, was now being hailed as one of the most innovative ecological recovery methods ever attempted. Bit by bit, the so-called airstrike of mice became more than just a headline. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even the strangest, most unconventional ideas can bring life back to where it was lost. Guam, once silenced by its invaders, was learning to sing again. What made the story so powerful was its irony. Humans had caused the problem in the first place by accidentally bringing snakes to Guam through cargo ships, hidden away in crates and supplies during the chaos of post-war reconstruction. What started as an unnoticed stowaway became a nightmare that devoured an entire island's voice. For decades, people watched helplessly as the forests went silent, a paradise slowly suffocated by its own invader. And now, after years of destruction and loss, humans were finally fixing what they had broken, not through violence or bombs, but with knowledge, patience, and creativity. It was as if the same species that had caused the problem had finally matured enough to understand the value of balance. The idea of using something as gentle as a mouse, a creature often considered weak or insignificant, to fight a devastating predator became almost poetic. It was a story of redemption written by science and nature together. The mouse, symbolizing vulnerability, became the hero, and the humans, once destroyers, became partners in restoration. It showed that true strength doesn't come from domination, but from harmony. When humans stop trying to overpower nature and instead listen to it, its rhythms, its logic, its quiet intelligence. The results can be extraordinary. This moment wasn't just about killing snakes. It was about realizing that healing the planet sometimes means humbling ourselves before it. When photos and videos of the operation spread online, people couldn't believe it. Headlines read, "U.S. drops mice on Guam to kill snakes," and it works. Scientists around the world praised the ingenuity of the method. It became a case study in environmental restoration, a lesson in how unconventional ideas can sometimes do what conventional thinking cannot. The mouse airstrike showed that you don't always need massive machinery or complex technology to fight ecological battles. Sometimes all it takes is understanding how nature thinks and working with it, not against it. The story of Guam teaches us something deeper than just ecological management. It shows how fragile balance truly is, how one small change can ripple through an entire ecosystem for generations. It reminds us that every invasive species, every human mistake, leaves a scar, but also that healing is possible. Because if dead mice can save a living forest, imagine what humans can achieve when they truly decide to restore what they've broken. Today, the skies above Guam occasionally fill again with tiny white parachutes drifting gracefully through the humid island air, a sight that's both haunting and hopeful. Each one carries not destruction, but redemption. What was once a scene that might have symbolized conflict, aircraft releasing cargo over land, has now become an emblem of healing. From afar, they look like soft snowflakes falling over emerald forests, a quiet choreography between humans and nature. And in every small package, in every silent descent of a mouse, lies a story that reminds the world how innovation can come from humility, and how science, when guided by respect, can repair what arrogance once broke. Each mouse that falls carries more than just a dose of acetaminophen. It carries a message that sometimes the strangest ideas are born out of desperation, and from that desperation comes brilliance. It carries decades of loss, lessons, and learning, the heartbreak of watching an island's birds vanish, and the determination of those who refuse to let that silence be permanent. The soundless fall of thousands of parachutes is no longer the sound of battle. It's the sound of forgiveness, of a second chance granted to both man and the natural world. And as they drift down through clouds and sunlight, landing softly on the green expanse below, they remind us that every problem we create can have a solution. If we are willing to see nature not as an enemy to control, but as a partner to understand. On Guam, the skies that once delivered chaos now deliver hope. Each drop is a promise. That restoration, though slow and fragile, is possible when humanity finally chooses to work with the planet instead of against it. Conclusion. From laughter to legacy. What began as a global joke ended as a scientific triumph. The world laughed at the absurd image of mice raining from helicopters. But 20 years later, they realized that this crazy idea had helped rescue one of the world's most damaged ecosystems. The U.S. airdrop operation in Guam wasn't just about killing snakes. It was about learning that in the face of chaos, nature often gives us the simplest solutions. Sometimes the strangest ideas turn out to be the most powerful. So, the next time you hear about a wild, impossible plan to save the planet, don't laugh too soon. Because just like the mice that fell from the sky over Guam, it might just work. And before you go, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still believes humans can't make peace with nature.